XojoApp is a set of reusable classes for Xojo developers. It's available in both a desktop and an iOS edition. In this short video, we're going to highlight some of the classes that are available in the iOS edition. Included with the user guide is all the reference information on the classes, how to drag a couple of folders of files into your project, and then use the classes within your Xojo application. Some of the sample applications that are provided are a vector drawing tool, a superfast XML class for reading and writing virtually any kind of data, a scrollable programmatic grid control that you can add to the different views of your application, or a device-specific serial number activation licensing system. Another significant part of the iOS edition of XojoApp is a set of classes and functions to ease the migration from a desktop to an iOS application. We're going to go ahead and launch the iOS MyDraw sample application, put it in landscape mode so we can view the screen a bit better. It demonstrates several of the classes that come with XojoApp, including the iXojo palette, which allows you to introduce a horizontal or a vertical palette with your own icons for tools in the application. It also demonstrates the use of the iOS Xojo Draw class, which also allows the Object 2D and 3D classes in iOS, very similar to what you have in the desktop environment. So you can basically draw vector type objects on the diagram. We've got a little menu in this sample application where we can go and change some of the various properties, like the outline color and the fill color, the background color of the drawing surface itself, the shape sizes and such. And now if we go back and use that, we can see the effects of those property changes on some of these objects that are being drawn within this iOS Xojo Draw class. The iOS MyXML sample application demonstrates how to read and write XML data as a file using a simple class, and the real advantage is even for very large files, it's very fast to read and write that data. You can see a demonstration of the code by looking at the code behind the write and the read buttons at the bottom of this screen. Looking at a sample application that demonstrates the iOS Xojo grid control. So a grid is basically a set of columns and rows with data in it. That data can be static or editable. There's all different kinds of cell types. For example, here we have a cell containing a few checkboxes. The user can just tap on it to change the state of the text boxes or the radio buttons within the grid. If they want to change a value, they can double click and then edit the value. Now the grid, everything about it is programmable, so the application can change the number of columns, the number of rows, the column width, the row height, the foreground text fonts and sizes and styles, and the background colors, and show and hide individual rows or columns. Everything is programmatically accessible in that grid control from your application. So this sample application demonstrates the iOS Xojo license component. This implements cloud license for iOS devices. Cloud license consists of a server, either an account on Safe Activation Service 3, or you can self-host the cloud license server on your own Linux or Windows website. And you fill in a few screens of information on the server, and then by adding this component and calling a couple of functions, you can implement a variety of different types of licenses, including time-limited trial licenses, product licenses that once activated run forever but only on that device, try-buy licenses, subscription licenses. The way you actually implement a license is pretty simple. There's a set of parameters here, and you use those in a couple of function calls. But to make it easy for testing out the different types of licenses, we've added a screen to this sample application that shows all the different parameters, so you can just edit them and then try out all the different license types. The main thing you're doing though is your application is going to call the setup command and then a validate command, which presents the screen to the user where they can type in a serial number they purchased from you during the purchase process. And you can prompt for whatever additional information you want to collect. And then the user can activate, and then once they've activated, your application can periodically check during important functions of your application to make sure it is an active application. Otherwise, present up an error screen to the user to inform that they must first activate before they can use the application. So if you've started to migrate a desktop application you created in Xojo over to the iOS environment, you'll probably notice that there's some fundamental changes to the framework that can ripple through and cause lots of compile errors. For example, in the desktop environment, the data object is mutable and has a wide set of properties that you can use. In the iOS version, date is read-only and has a very limited set of properties. The iOS data class provided by XojoApp basically works the same on iOS as it does in the desktop environment. Another thing we've added for migration is in the desktop environment, you're probably using strings throughout all of your application, but string data type is not available for iOS. Instead, you'll have to use text. However, for the text data type, the same kind of functions that you typically use on strings are not available. So all has been added in the XojoApp. For example, functions like mid, split, join, str or value, all the different kinds of functions that you would typically use with strings in a desktop application. Now you can use those same things with text objects in an iOS application.